every court in the United States. So this is universally applicable across the board. I don't care where you are. This is now the law. Very, very interesting case because it sort of blends a regulatory taking with a physical taking in a manner that is rarely done. It's a case that I get very excited about because it's a very property owner friendly case in that it really, I think, protects private property rights in the manner in which was intended at the time the constitutional provisions were written, which you don't see a lot of that anymore. What happened in that case was there was a California regulation that allowed union organizers to go onto private property, farms, vineyards, what have you, and meet with the workers, mostly migrant workers, for a certain number of hours a day, a certain number of days, 120 days a year. Well, some of the property owners, the growers, the vineyard owners, the farmers, weren't really big fans of that regulation because they said, hey, this is private property and you can't come on here, no thanks. Well, under that regulation, they had an unbridled right to do so. Consequently, the owners filed suit in federal court for two things. Number one, for an inverse condemnation case because of the taking of their private property rights. And number two, to enjoin the enforcement of that provision on the basis that it was unconstitutional. Well, that case went through the California courts and all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and the property owners, the growers, ultimately prevailed. And again, that decision just came out June 23rd of 2021. So it's a very, very exciting case for property rights. There's a couple of really interesting things in the case that I would like to point out. What the court said was that the California access regulation appropriates the right to invade the grower's property and therefore constitutes a physical taking. That is a really important distinction because typically in a physical taking, you have the government building some sort of a public improvement on private property. In the context of a road widening project, if the road stops here, private property on this side, and they build the sidewalk here, you have a physical invasion of the private property, and it's a per se physical invasion. It's tangible, you can see it. In this case, it was a regulation, but the regulation allowing access onto the private property was ruled by the United States Supreme Court to be a physical appropriation of that property. And here's the way that they reasoned that. They stated that one of the most important property rights of the bundle of rights, and if you're watching this video, you're likely a property owner, and as a property owner, most folks are familiar that the ownership of private property is a bundle of rights. It's the right to possess, it's the right to exclude others, it's the right to access, it's the right to light, air, and view, it's the right to quiet enjoyment. It's all these things collectively that's referred to as the bundle of rights that constitutes private property. This decision so uniquely articulates that one of the most important sticks in that bundle of rights is the right to exclude others. And the fact that this regulation allowed third parties, being the labor organizers, the people that are running the unions, trying to get union labor to join, were now given the right to go onto private property without the owner's permission. Therefore, the owner's right to exclude was taken. And they said that that was tantamount to a physical taking of the property. What it did was it created an easement over the owner's property for which these third parties could now travel and go in and out at their will against the owner's wishes. And that constituted a taking. So it's really a pretty incredible case. And one thing I do want to read to you that I love when they do this. It's a rare occasion when the courts go back, all the way back to when the Constitution was written. And they draw on some of that language from historic documents that gives context to what these rights really mean in our democracy and in our form of government. And in this case, they went all the way back and they quoted John Adams and said, John Adams tersely put it, property must be secured or liberty cannot exist. One of my other favorite quotes is from George Washington. And George Washington said, "Private property rights and freedom are inseparable. You can't have one without the other." Don't forget that. Private property rights are critically important to our democratic way of life, and that's regardless of where you stand politically. Private property is the backbone of our democracy, and it must be zealously protected under the law. And God bless America, the United States Supreme Court did just that in this Cedar Point Nursery decision.